boy, known only as the Kid, is 14 years old when he slips away from his bleak home in Tennessee. His mother died bringing him into the world, and his father is a drunk who never once tries to stop him from leaving. The Kid heads off with very little, a few vague memories, an empty stomach, and a knack for getting into fights. His journey takes him downriver to New Orleans, where he works odd jobs and wanders the streets. One night, he's stabbed by a Maltese boatswain in a tavern scuffle. After surviving this wound with the help of a stranger, he runs off before he can repay the man's kindness. He keeps moving west before reaching Galveston and then drifting further inland. Along the way, he sees dark reminders that the world is cruel, including a corpse hanging from a tree. Each sight chips away at whatever innocence he once had. Eventually, the Kid stumbles into Nacogdoches in 1849. In a local revival tent, he watches a towering bald man named Judge Holden, or just the Judge, speak out against a preacher named Reverend Green. The Judge stands nearly 7 feet tall and has no hair anywhere, which makes him look almost unreal. While the Kid doesn't fully grasp what's happening, he sees the crowd whirl into a frenzy at the Judge's words. Soon, the crowd turns violent and the stunned Reverend Green flees. Later that night, the Kid lands in a nasty altercation at a saloon. He collides with Louis Toadvine, a rough outlaw who has no ears and brands on his forehead spelling out HT and F. Their fight ends in an uneasy truce and they proceed to burn down a hotel just to show they can. It's the start of a partnership where each man knows the other is dangerous, but that danger might come in handy on the road. The Kid heads out alone again. He wanders across the prairie, hungry and tired, snatching what he can to survive. At one point, he weaves leaves into a crude hat to keep off the merciless Texas sun. He meets a hermit living in a small shack. This man claims he was once a slave trader and even shows the Kid a dried human heart he keeps as a memento of his past sins. It sets the boy's nerves on edge, but he stays the night anyway. He can't afford to be picky about shelter. The hermit's strange stories unsettle him, so by morning, he leaves without looking back. He reaches Bexar, where thirst drives him into a cantina. He asks for work in exchange for a drink, but the barman laughs and mocks him. One insult leads to another, and the Kid responds the only way he knows how. The barman ends up dead, and the Kid slips away, finding refuge in the ruins of an old church. He's hungover and nauseous, and when he wakes, he goes in search of his missing mule, which he locates by a river. He takes a quick bath, trying to wash away the grime, blood, and guilt that cling to him. Not long after, a stranger approaches him with an offer. There's a man named Captain White who's recruiting folks for a filibustering mission into Mexico. Rumor is that Captain White still holds a grudge from past wars and thinks Mexico is ripe for American conquest. Anyone who signs up can expect horses, new clothes, and a chance at decent loot. The Kid, drawn by the promise of a fresh start and maybe some cash, signs on. Among White's ragged company, he sees farmers, drifters, and desperados. They march south, ignoring the warnings of a Mennonite who calls them doomed men. White is certain that once they set foot in Mexican territory, they'll be greeted as liberators. Hunger, thirst, and sickness plague them, but they press forward. Out in the desert, they discover how harsh northern Mexico can be. Cholera tears through the ranks, and some men stagger and die under the pitiless sun. They encounter a lone man living in a hut who offers little help. Days blur together in dust and sweat until, all of a sudden, Comanche warriors come riding at them in a sudden ambush. The Comanches tear through the filibusters with unbelievable ferocity. Many of White's men are slaughtered, horses scream, men scream louder, and the sand turns red with blood. Somehow, the Kid survives and flees with one other man, a wounded fellow named Sproul. They stagger away from the battlefield, haunted by the images of dead men and leftover carnage. In one horrifying scene, they pass a battlefield where the Comanches have hung lifeless babies as a warning. Sproul is in bad shape, coughing blood and nursing a savage bite on his arm. He tells the Kid bits and pieces of his past, though the Kid hardly listens. All he can think about is where to find water and how to stay alive in this hot, forsaken place. Mexicans on horseback pass them, taunting them in Spanish and then tossing them a little water. It isn't enough to keep Sproul from growing weaker by the hour. One night, a huge bat sinks its teeth into Sproul's wounded arm, and he dies soon after in agony. The Kid presses on until Mexican soldiers find him. They take him to the nearest town where Captain White's severed head sits in a jar in the plaza. The soldiers parade the Kid through the streets and throw him into the local jail in Chihuahua City. In a stroke of strange luck, Louis Toadvine is there too, locked in the same prison. Toadvine is just as mean as ever, but at least he's a familiar face. Another American prisoner, nicknamed Granny Rat, shares the cell. They stare down at the plaza through the bars and see a group of scalp hunters come rolling into town. Among these grim men, the Kid recognizes Judge Holden, the giant from Nacogdoches. The group's leader is John Joel Glanton, a small wiry man with black hair who commands this deadly band of outlaws. They've made a deal with the governor of Chihuahua to bring in Apache scalps for pay. The city's residents greet them like heroes because the Apaches have been raiding without mercy. Toadvine negotiates with the authorities, promising the kids and Granny Rat services. Soon, they're released to join Glanton and his scalp-hunting crew. Ratting out of Chihuahua City feels like a new start, though it quickly becomes clear that Glanton's gang is more ruthless than anything the kid has seen before. Tensions rise between two men who share the same name. One is Black Jackson, the other White Jackson. They loathe each other from day one and don't hide it. There's also a Welshman known as Bathcat who brags about hunting Aboriginal people in Van Diemen's Land. He's missing 2 fingers on one hand and he's got a number tattooed on his forearm, suggesting he was once a convict. Another troublemaker is David Brown, who later sports a gruesome necklace of ears. Then there's Tobin, an ex-priest who left the church under circumstances he doesn't fully explain. He's devout yet worldly, haunted by his past but clinging to his faith. The kid also notices a caged man referred to as the Idiot, James Robert Bell. The Idiot's brother Cloyce used to show him off like a freak for money. The judge seems oddly fascinated by the Idiot's pliable mind. Glanton leads them onward, collecting supplies from a Prussian arms dealer along the way. The judge smooth talks some suspicious Mexican officials, preventing a standoff. He's educated, speaks multiple languages, and can read men's intentions with uncanny skill. Before long, the scalp hunters stumble upon a family of traveling magicians. They let these fortune tellers follow for a while, but the gang pays them little mind. A strange moment occurs when one of the magicians lays out cards, and Glanton's card disappears right after being linked to war and revenge. Bad omens hover in the air, but the gang marches forward. They reach a settlement where Glanton coldly shoots an elderly Apache woman. Nobody tries to stop him. Some men look away, but few protest. In a nearby town called Janos, the local folks are relieved to see hired gunmen out to kill Apaches. One resident warns them that the men who hunt other men eventually lose their souls, but Glanton's crew doesn't care. As they move along a beach, White Jackson and Black Jackson finally come to blows when White Jackson tries to force the other away from the campfire. The fight ends with Black Jackson decapitating his rival. Not long after, the gang finds some Apache nearby and takes them by surprise, using rifles that outclass their enemies' weapons. The Apaches die fast. Blood and chaos feed Glanton's men, who ride on to the next stretch of desert. The road is full of misery. They pass a ruined carriage with corpses inside, and Glanton picks through valuables like a scavenger. In a deserted town, they come across a few survivors of an Apache raid who beg for protection. Glanton offers almost nothing but leaves them a scrap of supplies. That night, a brutal storm rolls in, and Judge Holden stands naked and unafraid in the lightning, reciting lines of poetry. His strange habits unnerve the men, but they're too exhausted and too afraid to question him. The next morning, one of the survivors from the night before has died under suspicious circumstances, though no one seems eager to find out how or why. As they continue, Tobin confides in the kid. He recalls how the judge first appeared to them in the desert. They'd been running from Apaches, low on ammo and water, when they spotted the pale, hairless giant sitting on a rock. The judge claimed he knew how to make gunpowder from the land itself. He mixed up sulfur, charcoal, and a dash of bat guano, then set a trap that turned the tails on their pursuers. His intelligence and leadership left a deep impression on Glanton. Tobin admits that he fears the judge more than any Apache.